Hello chums, welcome to 2026. Not been very reassuring so far, has it? But anyway, we press on. Contrary to intentions really, because all that talk about decluttering that I was doing, have I decluttered? No, but I've picked up a few not new titles, obviously, sort of vintage titles from various charity outlets in the last couple of weeks. So I'm going to sip on some homemade strawberry wine from a vintage VAT 69 glass and talk you through some of these. First, now I don't think this is that Warren Ellis. I don't think it's the guy from the Bad Seeds, which was my first assumption when I saw this. But anyway, this crooked little vein praise from Joss Whedon says, I think this book ate my soul. William Gibson, stop it, you're frightening me. Just plain weird, Kevin J. Anderson. Writes like a bipolar Raymond Chandler. Kinky Friedman. This is a kind of burned out private investigator story from the point of view of he's described as a self-styled shit magnate. And Michael McGill, he's perhaps rather topically, he's on the trail of what's described as a backup US Constitution. It seems the Constitution of the United States has some skeletons in its closet. The founding fathers doubted that the document would be able to stave off human nature indefinitely. So they devised a backup constitution to deploy at the first sign of crisis. In the government's eyes, that time is now. I think this is about 2007, incidentally. America is overgrown with perverts who spend more time surfing the web for fetish porn than they do reading a newspaper. So they want to use the secret constitution to drive the country back to a time when civility, God, and Mom's homemade apple pie was all that mattered, but nobody can find it. So it's like a odd bit of timing that I should pick this up, to say the least, but it's kind of a trawl through what I hope is an imaginary seedy underbelly. It's pretty disgusting so far, but entertainingly so. Next, this might be a dupe. I think I may already have a copy of this floating around somewhere within my filing system, non-existent. Malcolm Bradley, The History Man. I just remember this as one of those. I think it seemed like a bit of a daring TV series. It seemed a little bit risque at the time, this, as I remember it, the TV series. The main guy in it had this unfortunate resemblance to Peter Sutcliffe. That's one aspect I remember, which, given the timing of it, I think it went out in 81 or 82, was all a bit unfortunate. Then again, that was sort of a look. You know, sort of in any town in England, if he went to a pub, there'd be a guy who looked like that. It was sort of a look at the time. Anyhow, I've never read the novel, although, I say there probably is another copy kicking around. Maybe I'll get around to it this time. And possibly, I think this is another dupe. I think this is probably in better condition than my other copy. Richard Doyle's Deluge. I think the cover there gives you the plot pretty much. Yeah, again, sort of topical. It doesn't take much of a sudden rainfall for London streets to, obviously nothing like that, but to put a street out of commission and so on. So I don't know when this was written. This dates from, it has that kind of 70s look about it, 1976. Now, it's a bit of a week for dupes, but this one, okay, forewarning, the cover does look like part of the thumbnailing stage for a certain British political party's new logo. But this is the film tie-in edition of Hans Helmut Kirst's Night of the Generals. Peter O'Toole pictured there. Notice the advert for Polish ice cream just to the right of him. That backdrop depicts burning area of Warsaw. So I think this being a sort of nice film tie-in edition, this will probably transplant the other edition I've got on my shelves here. Yeah, that cover shot depicting this Actually, Night of the Generals, it tends to kind of get a bit passed over. It's a bit unappreciated as far as war films go, because I think it's a pretty good one. It's not, not a conventional one, but as a study of psychosis, I suppose, it's quite effective. Peter O'Toole's performance is worryingly convincing, I would say. Incidentally, there's a guy who works in a barber shop near me who swears blind he gave O'Toole a shave once. I don't know if he was living around here at that time or what. But yeah, there's very worth seeing as a film. I have read the novel before, and it is, similarly engaging. And there's a few of Kirst's works I've started and never quite got through. I've never had that problem with this one. It is one you can pretty much blaze through fairly quickly. Incidentally, Kirst, although most of his work adopts this kind of critically satirical tone towards the National Socialist regime of the time. During the war, he had been, he had sung from the hymn sheet, really. He is on record as having been a party member. I think he did later express regret about that. It says here that he stated that he had confused National Socialism with Germany, ended the war as a first lieutenant, so I suppose well placed to be talking about the subject matter in any case. Next, now more of that time imagery at the bottom of this cover design. I will leave exposed the pic depicting what appears to be a dried up severed head. This is, I think it was an Australian author, originally written in the 50s. This, you can tell by the look of it, it's a 70s reprint of it. It's set in New Guinea. It has that kind of late colonialism kind of flavour to it, and it is described as a potboiler. It is set in the New Guinea Highlands and centres around the questionable activities of a doctor, what's the guy's name? Dr. Sonderfeld, I think his name is, who has a rather dubious past, dubious record within a World War II death camp. He's fled to the other side of the world, established himself in a new life, but he's still up to questionable things. He's trying to manipulate the local tribes by his understanding of their particular beliefs. I don't know how ethnological true any of that is. I have little more than a layman's knowledge or understanding of Papua New Guinea, other than if you've ever watched that documentary about the disappearance of Michael Rockefeller. I believe it's on Tubi, and there's also been a dramatisation, or concerning at least, that as part of the plot. There's a horror film called Welcome to the Jungle, which is, I suppose, a cross between the Blair Witch and Cannibal Holocaust, which would work because famously Blair Witch was inspired by Cannibal Holocaust, which was an earlier found footage film. That whole story centres around a reputed tribal practice, which actually so far hasn't been mentioned in here, although that cover graphic might refer to it. Next up, now I have very little idea about this one. I just thought the cover looked promising. The Microcosm by Maureen Duffy, a novel of a twilight world of women. You look twice. They've done something quite clever in pre-Photoshop days. You can see what they've done with that cover image there. So I'm trying to figure out if this one's might be slightly rare. I couldn't find on any of the aid books and all those things any sort of indication of what the price of this might be these days, but it looks like it's possibly a slightly hard to find edition. Next, Strange Meeting by Susan Hill. I know I read a few of hers as a kid. I'm trying to remember the titles. I remember them being quite, tended to be quite unsettling stories. I think there was one called A Bit of Singing and Dancing. Right, I know what it was. I'm the King of the Castle. I remember reading that as a kid, and also famously the author of The Woman in Black. So yeah, I don't think I've been near her work in some decades, but time for a revisit perhaps. Next, more historical imagery, historical political imagery. I'm going to slightly obscure there. The Expendable Spy by Jack D. Hunter. Now, Jack D. Hunt is known as the novel of the First World War novel, The Blue Max. That novel, incidentally, I keep meaning to get around to this, that novel has sequels. I don't think many people realise there are 2 sequels to that one, but we'll get to that in another video. I know nothing about this. I've never heard of this title before. I think, it's a Second World War set rather than First. I'm not sure how well known this one is, obviously compared to the Blue Max. Probably not so much, but again, interesting looking find. Finally, now this is a new title. This is Jodrell Atomic by James, or as I know him, Jim Fry, who you may know from his musical. He's got a background both in music and photography, and his photography features here. Now, there's a caveat on the back. This is not a textbook. It's kind of more dream association between his memories of Jodrell Bank and the countryside around it, and he kind of twins that in a perhaps not logical, it seems to work anyway. He twins that with the Mount Fuji area of Japan. It's a mixture of prose and Jim's photography in here. Available from Jim's website, jamesfryimage.com. There's a tie-in album as well by the Pre-New, which is Jim's most recent band to the demise of El Brutus. So yeah, I suppose there's an aspect of that retro-futurism thing to this, and some fairly free-form associations on Jim's part, but that's the charm of it, I think. I also touched on a previous book of his a couple of years ago, License to Rock and Pop, which you can kind of see that thought process at work in that as well. So yes, thank you, Jim. This just came through a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, that's it for this one anyway. Quite an odd mix going on there, but decluttering, I'm powerless. I've no willpower at all to do anything about this. I'll procrastinate. I'll distract myself by any means conceivable from getting stuff out the door. But anyway, thank you for joining me. Happy New Year. God help us all. And see you very soon.